Sophie Keller had hit her limit. As she sat at her cluttered desk at Crestmont Capital's downtown office, the familiar sound of laughter echoed across the room. His laughter. Eric Langston, her ex, the man who had ghosted her 3 months ago and somehow still believed he owned the space around her. Today he was in rare form, boasting loudly to a group of analysts. "She still texts me sometimes," he said with a smirk. "Some women just don't move on." Sophie clenched her jaw. She hadn't texted him once, not since the day he walked out, claiming he needed space to think, then showed up at the company party with a model from a dating app 2 weeks later. Tomorrow was Crestmont's annual gala, and everyone was expected to bring a date. She could already picture Eric walking in with someone surgically sculpted and smiling too hard. He'd flash that arrogant smirk, look her way, and wait for her reaction. Not this time. Sophie opened her laptop and typed, "Corporate event companion, discreet Manhattan." She scrolled past flashy profiles until one caught her eye. Julian, for social functions. Professional. Respectful. Elegant. $500. Discretion guaranteed. The photos were different. No overacted smiles. Just a man in a sharp charcoal suit, standing against a city skyline, eyes calm and unreadable. He looked more like a boardroom closer than a party escort. The price seemed low for someone like him, but Sophie wasn't in the mood to overthink. She sent a message. "Event tomorrow. Gala. Need someone who can play the role. No drama. 7 p.m., coffee to discuss details." He replied in less than 2 minutes. "Confirmed. I'll meet you at 7. You choose the place." Just like that, she had a date and a plan. And for the first time in months, Sophie Keller felt like she was taking her power back. At 6:58 p.m., Sophie walked into the little cafe in Midtown she had chosen. It was warm, wood-paneled, and quiet. She ordered a tea and found a table near the window. She wasn't nervous. Not really. But this wasn't something she'd normally do. Hiring a stranger. Pretending. At exactly 7 o'clock, the door opened. Julian walked in. Slate gray suit. Crisp white shirt. Hair neatly styled. Not a trace of uncertainty in his step. His eyes scanned the room once before locking on hers. "Sophie," he asked, voice low and even. She stood. "Julian." He nodded. They shook hands. His grip was confident, but not arrogant. His posture was effortless. And when he sat across from her, he didn't fidget, didn't scan the room. He just listened. "Let's get to it," Sophie said. "Tomorrow's event is formal. My ex will be there. He'll try to get under my skin. I just need you to pretend to be my boyfriend. Convincingly. Nothing more." "Understood," Julian said. She laid out a simple backstory. They met in a bookstore, bonded over a coffee spill, dated casually for 2 months. He was a freelance consultant. They were keeping things low-key. Julian nodded, taking mental notes. "Have you done this before?" she asked. "A few times." "For $500? He gave the faintest smile. Not everything is about money. That line stuck with her. "Okay, Mr. Mystery. I'm Sophie Keller, junior analyst at Crestmont Capital. Tomorrow, you'll be playing the part of the man who made me forget my ex existed. Can you handle that?" Julian held her gaze. "Absolutely." As they stood to leave, he handed her a card. "If things go sideways, just say white wine 3 times. She raised an eyebrow. "Is that some code?" "A reminder," he said, "that you're safe." She tucked it into her purse, watching him leave first. As the door closed behind him, she couldn't help but think, this man wasn't just playing a role. The next morning, Sophie woke up before her alarm. She hadn't slept much. Julian's words kept replaying in her mind. Not everything is about money. Who even says that, especially when they're being paid to play a role? All day at the office, she tried to stay focused, but her mind wandered to his perfectly tailored suit, the calm confidence in his eyes, the strange way he seemed too polished for this sort of job. At 11:35 a.m., a new message arrived on her phone. Can we meet again before the event? Same cafe, 12:30? Just need a few clarifications. Julian. Sophie replied with a single word. Sure. When she arrived, Julian was already seated at their table, this time in a navy shirt, sleeves rolled back just slightly. Somehow, he looked even better in daylight. You're punctual, she said. Always, he replied with a slight smile. They got down to business quickly. You mentioned your ex works with you, Julian said. What should I expect? Eric is smug, competitive. He'll try to provoke you. Or me. Probably both. Julian nodded. What about your colleagues? Some are fine. Others, like Lindsay in HR or Chris from accounting, live for gossip. They'll analyze every glance, every touch. Understood, Julian said, making mental notes. Tell me more about Crestmont, just in case. Sophie frowned. You don't need to know about work. I do if I'm pretending to be your boyfriend. It'll look strange if I ask dumb questions about your job. It made sense, but the way he asked, too smooth, too curious. Still, she complied. We're a private equity firm. I'm in market analysis. Recently restructured? That stopped her cold. How do you know that? Julian shrugged. I read up on things. Habits die hard. She gave him a suspicious look. You really studied finance, didn't you? A bit of everything, he said vaguely. You're mysterious. And you're direct. For the next 30 minutes, they refined story. How they met, their favorite restaurant, the book they were both reading. Julian remembered every detail, almost too well. And when she mentioned her ex hated classic movies, Julian smiled and said, Then let's say I love them. Casablanca's my favorite. Sophie laughed. You're building an anti-Eric. Isn't that the point? When they stood to leave, Julian looked at her seriously. If anything makes you uncomfortable tonight, remember the code. White wine 3 times. Got it. He smiled again, but this time, the smile didn't quite reach his eyes, and Sophie realized, once again, she had no idea who this man really was. The Hilton's grand hall sparkled with warm chandeliers and soft jazz. Sophie arrived early, in a deep green dress that hugged her silhouette, elegant but powerful. She wasn't there to impress Eric, but she was definitely there to show him she had moved on. At 8 o'clock sharp, Julian arrived. Sophie stared. He wore a black tuxedo that looked custom-made, not rented. His walk was poised, commanding. Heads turned. Evening, he said, offering his arm. Wow, she whispered. You clean up nice. You expected anything less, he teased. As they entered the ballroom together, Sophie felt every eye on them. But instead of nerves, she felt powerful. They made rounds. Julian was flawless. He remembered every name Sophie whispered to him seconds before. He asked the right questions, laughed at the right times, and when Eric finally noticed them, Sophie felt Julian's hand tighten gently around hers. There he is, Julian murmured. Let him come to us, Sophie said calmly. And he did. Eric walked over with that smug, rehearsed smirk. Well, well, he said, looking Julian up and down. Didn't expect this. Hi, Eric, Sophie replied sweetly. This is Julian, my boyfriend. Julian extended his hand. Pleasure. Eric shook it, but Sophie noticed the flicker in his eyes. Julian's presence rattled him. What do you do? Eric asked. Consulting, Julian replied smoothly. Private sector. Mostly finance. Interesting, Eric muttered, clearly caught off guard. He turned to Sophie. Can I speak to you for a minute? Alone. Julian stepped in before she could answer. I'm sorry, but anything you need to say to her, you can say with me here. Eric's mask cracked. Sophie smiled. I agree. Eric hesitated, then grumbled. Fine. I just wanted to say, I hope you're happy. I am, she said. Genuinely. Eric turned and walked off, defeated. Julian leaned in. That was satisfying. You have no idea. As the night wore on, they danced once, slow and quiet. Sophie couldn't ignore the way she felt when Julian's hand touched the small of her back. You're good at this, she whispered. I'm not acting, he replied. And that's when she realized. Neither was she. Julian's message the next morning was simple. Dinner at my place tonight? I cook. You asked your questions. Sophie hesitated. Everything inside her said she should walk away. But curiosity, and something else, was winning. The address he sent wasn't just uptown. It was elite. When the cab pulled up to a sleek high-rise overlooking Central Park, Sophie's heart skipped. A doorman greeted her, by name. The lobby was marble and glass, the kind you only see in magazines. No way a $500 a night escort lives here. The elevator opened directly into Julian's penthouse. He stood barefoot in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up, 2 wine glasses already poured. You came, he said. I had questions, and I promised answers. His home was warm, minimalist, stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the space, offering an unreal view of the skyline. Art adorned the walls. A piano sat in one corner, and the smell of roasted garlic filled the air. I didn't peg you for a chef, Sophie said, setting down her coat. I'm full of surprises, he replied. They sat at the island as Julian cooked. He moved confidently in the kitchen, chopping herbs like a professional. So, she started, let's talk. He met her gaze. I figured you Googled me. I tried. You're a ghost. No LinkedIn. No social media. No real trace. That's intentional. Why? Because when people know who you are, they stop being real. And who are you, Julian? He plated salmon, set the dishes down, and leaned on the counter. I'm Julian Cross, 32, founder and CEO of Crosswell Holdings, private equity, tech energy. We manage about $3.4 billion in assets. Sophie nearly choked on her wine. You're joking. He shook his head. You work at Crestmont. You know we're one of your biggest silent investors. She stared at him, stunned. You knew who I was. Not at first. Not until you mentioned the firm. And you didn't think that was important. Julian's jaw tightened. I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how. So you let me hire you. He sighed. That night at the cafe, I was just scrolling. I saw your message. Something about it made me say yes. I didn't know it'd be you. Sophie sat back. Everything suddenly felt surreal. You live in a penthouse. You're a billionaire. Why pretend to be someone else? Julian poured more wine and leaned closer. Because I wanted to be seen. Not as a CEO. Not as an investment. Just seen. For once. She watched him carefully. There was no arrogance in his voice. Just honesty. And you saw me, he said softly. Not the brand. Not the billions. Me. Sophie looked down at her plate, unsure what to believe. Her feelings were a mess. But one thing was clear. Julian Cross was no ordinary man. By Monday morning, Sophie's photo was on 3 gossip blogs. Mystery CEO spotted with Crestmont analyst. Is Julian Cross dating a junior employee? Conflict of interest or office romance? She walked into the office to whispered stares and accidental email forwards. At 10 a.m., her phone buzzed. HR needs to see you. Now, Ricardo, the company's COO, didn't mince words. Are you in a relationship with Julian Cross? That's my private life. You're suspended, Sophie. What? Until this is sorted. Conflict of interest. Investor relations is nervous. Sophie left the room in shock. Her heart pounded, not just from anger, but hurt. Again, her career was in someone else's hands. She texted Julian. We need to talk. Now, they met at a quiet spot in Soho. Julian had already seen the headlines. I'm sorry, he said before she even sat down. Are you? You knew this would happen. You're you. Of course the press would find out. I thought I could shield us a little longer. Well, you were wrong. I'm suspended, Julian. His jaw clenched. I'll fix it. No, you won't storm into my office and save the day again. Why not? Because I'm not your project. The silence that followed was deafening. She looked him straight in the eye. Tell me the truth. Did you stay interested in me because of where I worked? No. Sophie, did you? His pause was half a second too long. I found it intriguing, he admitted, but that's not why I stayed. Her heart broke a little at the honesty. I can't do this, she whispered, standing. It's too complicated. Julian didn't follow her, and Sophie walked away for the second time. This time, not because of anger, but because it hurt too much to stay. 3 days passed in a blur. Sophie stayed home, silencing calls and emails. Headlines cooled, but whispers didn't. She didn't hear from Julian until Friday morning. She was just finishing her coffee when her phone buzzed with a new message. I'm coming. You don't need to do this alone. Julian. She barely had time to react when a colleague called her. Turn on the office live stream. Right now. Sophie opened her laptop, confused, and froze. There he was. Julian Cross. At Crestmont Capital's boardroom. Not in secret. Not in shadows. In front of every senior executive. I'm here to address something important, Julian said calmly. Suit flawless. Posture commanding. Sophie Keller. Ricardo, the COO, shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Cross. No, Julian interrupted. You suspended one of your best analysts because she had the courage to be honest. Because of me. Let me correct the narrative. He paced once, slowly. Sophie didn't use her position. She never leaked information. She never even mentioned that I was an investor. I asked her questions, yes, but she refused to answer when they got too close to confidential. That's called integrity. A few murmurs echoed behind the boardroom doors. Meanwhile, he continued, your own executives gossip and manipulate behind closed doors. Tell me, who should really be suspended? Ricardo tried to salvage it. Mr. Cross, with all due respect. Julian held up a hand. Respect isn't declared. It's earned. He stepped back and placed a letter on the boardroom table. This is my notice to divest. Crosswell Holdings will remove its stake in Crestmont over the next 90 days. I'll eat the loss happily, because I refuse to be part of a company that punishes its employees for who they love. Then he walked out. Sophie stared at the screen, stunned. Within hours, the company reversed her suspension. Ricardo personally called her, and on Monday, a formal apology arrived in her inbox with an offer for promotion. But none of it mattered, because Julian hadn't done it to prove his power. He had done it to protect her. The next time Sophie saw Julian, it wasn't in a penthouse. It was on a rooftop garden, quiet, under the soft glow of string lights. a space he'd created just for her. "Come in," he said softly as she stepped through the glass door. They hadn't spoken in days. She looked around. A table was set. Soft jazz played in the distance. Her favorite wine chilled. "You remembered," she said, smiling despite herself. "I remember everything," Julian replied. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Sophie asked, "Why did you really walk into that boardroom?" "Because no one gets to humiliate you. Not even a company I invested in. But you pulled out. I'd rather lose millions than lose you." Tears stung her eyes. "You didn't have to do all that." "I did," he said gently, "because I love you." Sophie looked down at her lap. I wasn't looking for love," she whispered. "Neither was I." They stood. He took her hand and led her to the edge of the rooftop, where the city glowed like fireflies below. "I never asked you this the right way," Julian said, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a small velvet box. "Julian," Sophie whispered. He opened it. Inside, a simple ring. No flashy diamonds. Just elegance. "Sophie Keller," he said. "I don't want a contract. I want forever. Will you be my partner in life, the same way you were brave enough to be my partner in truth?" She stared at the ring, heart pounding. "I hired you for one night," she said, voice breaking. "But somehow, you gave me every reason to believe again." She nodded. "Yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her as the wind rustled around them. Somewhere far below, the city never stopped moving. But up here, everything finally stood still. The screen fades into a glowing ballroom. A sign reads, "Launch Party, Keller Cross Impact Ventures." Sophie, in a sleek white dress, walks to the stage. Julian waits at her side in a navy suit. Together, they address a room full of investors, journalists, and dreamers. "We started with $500, Sophie says, smiling at him. Julian laughs. "And now I still owe her interest." The room erupts in applause. As they step down, hand in hand, Sophie whispers, "Best investment I ever made." Julian leans in. Return on love, infinite. The camera pans up. Fade to black.